Hey, Prime members. Are you tired of ads interfering with your favorite podcasts? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free podcasts. That's amazon.com/ad-free podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
I'm Laura Norton, and this is One Strange Thing, the show where we search the nation's news archives for stories that can't quite be explained. Strangers, we've touched on this subject before in a manner of ways, and for good reason. The photograph, it holds a special place in the world of the paranormal. If you see something absolutely bizarre in the year 2025, like say Bigfoot fighting Mothman in the Denver airport, then you can simply pull out your phone and snap a photo. But before that, well, cameras were as good as it got. In fact, when cameras and then camcorders became common and then portable, regular people, just like you and me, were able to capture some amazing things. Possible UFOs and blurry cryptids running away through thickets, and for some reason, an excess of threatening clowns in places where they have no business being. And because humans are, well, humans, we also got very good at faking all of the above. Well, we guess that clowns are real, although sometimes we wish that they were not. But our point is that cameras have been used in paranormal hoaxes for a very long time. To present dinner plates as flying saucers, to help pass off cardboard cutouts as fairies, and the use of double exposures to create ghosts. You know the drill. Many formerly famous shots have since been outed as hoaxes, like that 1934 Loch Ness Monster photo, the one that turned out to be of a toy submarine. As our photo capabilities advance, society has been able to disprove mysteries of the past, even as new, more advanced entries into the annals of the strange pop up on social media every single day. But there are a few vintage paranormal photos out there that have not yet been disproven. Not for sure. One hotly debated snapshot is of a figure known as the Solway Spaceman, or the Cumberland Spaceman. It was taken way back in May of 1964 in the northwest of England. Now, we are Americans, but our understanding is that Cumberland is a historic county in the modern-day county of Cumbria. And we won't get into all of that, but in large strokes, think of it as an older division that's still commonly known and a name that is still in use. We're pretty sure that we have that right, but please do not email us about it. We also extensively researched the pronunciations, and you may still be privately angry about those. Anyway, according to Britannica, Cumbria's largest, quote, urban area is the city of Carlisle. It's currently home to around 78,000 people, and has roots so ancient that we could produce several documentaries about it. But we're mostly concerned with one particular family who lived there, way back in the 1960s. Jim Templeton, a firefighter, his wife Annie, and their 2 young daughters. In particular, we're interested in their youngest, Elizabeth, who was just 5 in the spring of 1964. And on a family trip to a local picnic spot, she became the subject of one of the most famous unexplained photos of all time. Or one of the subjects. The other one, we don't know who he or it is. We'll note in this episode, as in our last, that some of the coverage at the time appeared in tabloids. That said, they featured important details, so we think we should include them in our tale. So, to begin the story with a distinctly non-tabloidic source, the BBC, it was a nice spring day when Jim Templeton decided to take his family on a little trip. Burgh Marsh overlooks Solway Firth. According to Britannica, Firth is the Scottish word for inlet, and the family decided to settle down on a spot in the grass and enjoy the day. According to Jim and his wife, there was not a crowd. They saw only an elderly couple who reportedly sat in their car. Jim had brought his camera that day, as one does when visiting a scenic area. When envisioning this scene, imagine a vibrant expanse of salt marsh plant life, the perfect backdrop for Jim to try out something new. Per the News and Star, he purchased some of the new, quote, Kodacolor film, which was processed by Kodak, and loaded it into his SLR camera. And since his daughter Elizabeth was wearing a new dress that day, he made sure to take 3 shots of her in a row, positioned on the vibrant green landscape. It was a lovely contrast. The bright blue sky, the verdant ground, and Elizabeth's bright floral print frock. Jim, he was well pleased with the composition, and he took other pictures that day. All in all, they had a lovely, uneventful time, and they returned home well satisfied. According to the BBC, quote, it was only when the chemist who processed his pictures pointed out that the shot had been spoiled by a figure that he realized that there had been somebody or something else present. When Jim examined one of the shots of 5-year-old Elizabeth, he saw a strange figure in the near distance behind her. The immediate assumption would be, of course, that someone had wandered into the photo. But he and Annie, his wife, who they said had been standing behind him when the photo was taken, they both clearly remembered that no one else had been anywhere near them. And their other daughter, Frances, she was much too small to be this figure, who was big, maybe even bigger than an adult. The bright sunshine made it difficult to make out details, but it seemed to be someone or something in a white spacesuit, complete with a kind of helmet, and gazing off into the distance. As you might imagine, this was confusing to Jim, who'd seen no one else except for his wife and children and that elderly couple who'd remained in their car. He studied the picture for a long time, but he just couldn't make sense of it. Some people might shrug off the whole thing, but it seems that Jim, he was not some people. He decided to take his strange photo to the Carlisle police. According to the Financial News, local law enforcement examined Jim's snapshot and his negatives. They were pretty sure that he hadn't done anything to alter them, like juxtapose 2 images or manipulate the film after the fact. And they knew that he had not developed the film himself. But they had no idea who was in the photo with Elizabeth. As quoted in a 1964 Daily Mirror article, a police spokesman said of the figure, "It is a mystery, but we're not taking it seriously. He must be a freak." The he in question, we hasten to add, was not Jim, but the spaceman. We aren't sure what kind of freak they meant, but it certainly was not a positive observation. And in any case, it did not tell Jim much about his photo. According to Dr. David Clark, a professor of media at Sheffield University, Jim then decided to send the photo to Kodak for further analysis. It seems that he was mostly interested, at least at first, in figuring out if anything could have happened to the photo during processing. But we also suspect that Jim was feeling a little defensive about his photograph. The story was getting around, and folks, well, they were using the word hoax quite a bit. He'd pointed out a number of times that he was not the one who'd drawn attention to the strange figure in the first place. The chemist who developed the film was the one who'd pointed it out. and he and his family had noticed nothing amiss when they were out on the marsh. So, Jim must have been pleased when he got the results of the Kodak company's analysis. According to the Financial News, they too examined his print and the negatives, and they declared that the picture had not been tampered with and showed no irregularities at all. In fact, the company decided to, quote, offer a reward to anyone who could prove that the photo had been faked. This stirred up a lot of interest, and the whole story began to circulate much more widely. And that created some fascinating results, namely that readers saw the image of the strange figure behind Elizabeth and had their own interpretations of what exactly it might be.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
When newsreaders got their hands on the photo, they acted, well, very quickly. According to Dr. David Clark's blog, quote, soon after it appeared on page 1 of the Cumberland News, the image made headlines across the world. Jim's family were inundated with letters from people who identified the figure as an angel, an alien, and a spirit form. A figure in a spacesuit, though, aka a sort of alien, remained the most popular. Now, keep in mind, this was the 1960s, and space fever was still raging across the world. UFO sightings were still reported with regularity, and over in the United States, Project Blue Book was still up and running, with investigations into the extraterrestrial breathlessly covered in the press. The UK, it had its own alien fever, and Cumbria was a bit of a hotspot for that activity. Whitehaven News noted that between the 1950s and the 1980s, there were dozens of UFO sightings in Cumbria, including a particular sort of craft that the press referred to as, quote, flying triangles. Sometimes the paper noted, quote, black and sleek in design, with the ability to accelerate at a great speed. It's interesting that law enforcement were frequently witnesses to these UFOs, as were large crowds. So as you can imagine, people in the area, they were willing to at least entertain the idea that an alien in a spacesuit might be kind of hanging around on a local salt marsh. But still, why that spot in particular? Well, the local police, they were willing to offer a theory. Kind of. Remember that Daily Mirror article we mentioned earlier, when they dubbed the figure a freak? We certainly do, and that's not all that was said. They also had some thoughts as to what the figure in the photo might have been doing when he, or it, was captured on film. They went on to suppose that the spaceman / possible freak was, quote, looking towards an atomic station and the NATO radio station base, and it must have been 7 feet tall, if it was really there. Now, we have to assume that last bit was based on the relative size of Elizabeth versus the figure, but we aren't sure exactly how they made their calculations. As for the mention of an atomic station and a NATO radio base, prepare for some rather lengthy discourse, and we are sorry to say, a bit of supposition. As the Daily Mirror decided to provide exactly 0 details on anything, we had to do some digging as to what precisely the police supposed that this spaceman might have been looking at. One option for this, quote, atomic station was Calder Hall Nuclear Power Station, which was completed in 1956. According to the Institution of Civil Engineers, it was located near Cumbria and was overseen by the Atomic Energy Authority. Another option was the sister station of Calder Hall, Chapel Cross. It was constructed in southernmost Scotland and fed into Solway Firth. As for the radio station base, well, per the National Physical Laboratory, that would be the Naval Anthorn radio station, also in Cumbria, and very near Solway Firth. It is indeed a NATO facility. So, if we are to understand the Daily Mirror's reporting, the idea was that this strange being was meant to be looking in the direction of these major and important installations. But why? Maybe it was to observe human technology, to spy, to lurk? It is unclear. In any scenario, we consider this to be a pretty weak theory. If an extraterrestrial wanted to check out a nuclear plant or a military facility, well, it might decide to do so a little bit closer than from the middle of a salt marsh. Maybe from the convenience of, say, its UFO, or at least up close and personal if on land. There were enough of the UFOs spotted flying all around the county, apparently, to do some more intensive scouting. But Jim, he didn't have an answer to any of those questions. After all, it was not his theory. Per the BBC, he hadn't even seen the figure that had magically appeared behind his daughter, the one that had, as the chemist observed, quote, spoiled his best photo and created an enduring mystery. Perhaps one of the weirdest reactions to the circulation of Jim's photo came from Australia, at least according to Jim. Per the BBC, he found out about a, quote, a link to the planned launch of a Blue Streak missile in Australia from the technicians involved in the event. Per Jim's recounting, they had not been aware of it at the time, but, quote, just days after Mr. Templeton had taken his photograph, that missile test on the other side of the world was aborted by technicians who reported seeing 2 men in the firing range. And then, those same technicians saw the photo of Elizabeth and the spaceman on the front page of an Australian paper. They were, quote, stunned as the figure looked the same as the figures they saw close to the missile. Interesting, but what possible connection could exist between the launch and Cumbria? Well, the BBC reported that parts of the same rocket had been built in Cumbria, just, quote, a few miles from where Jim took his photo. And as he later told the Daily Mail, the parts had been tested there as well. And if you're wondering if UFOs were sighted around the time of that aborted launch in Australia, well, of course they were. Some skeptics have claimed that there's been no way to verify this story other than Jim's own word, other than where the rocket was constructed and the aborted launch itself, because he had no way to prove that he was contacted. And according to the Financial News, there was no photographic evidence from the launch day to support any appearance of mysterious figures. For Jim's part, he said that he received a letter from the technicians that detailed their story. He also said that he had no reason to lie about that. As he told the Daily Mail in 2002, 9 years before his death, he'd not only received 0 payment for his photo, but he'd put it into the public domain. It seemed that Jim truly wanted to learn more about what he'd photographed, not make a profit. We must say that there is a pretty strong contingent of skeptics that assumes no ill intent on Jim's part. Many of them are photographers or have experience with film. They argue that there's no mystery to the spaceman. In examining the photo, they see a simple explanation for the strange figure that mysteriously appeared behind Elizabeth. One that does not have to point to a deliberate hoax on Jim's or anyone else's part. In fact, it could very well be an experience that he did not remember at all, and at no fault of his own. According to Dr. David Clark, that theory is that the mysterious spaceman was actually Jim's wife, Annie. Though he and Annie both distinctly remember her being behind him when the photo was taken, The skeptics argue that she must have simply walked into the shot and that neither Jim or Annie remember. It would have been a minor thing, after all. Per Dr. Clark, quote, "This theory says the model of the camera used by Jim only revealed 70% of what the lens actually captured. Another photograph from the outing shows Mrs. Templeton wearing a blue dress, which has been overexposed to white. When manipulated in Photoshop, it resembles the color of the spaceman. What about the extreme height of the spaceman? Skeptics say, simply a trick of proportion in the photo. We have all seen that before. As for the helmet, Annie had a bob haircut that could have looked helmet-like, we suppose, if it was washed out enough in a photograph. There are those who argue against the simple answer, of course. For one thing, it's not very much fun. And Jim and Annie were pretty certain that she never walked behind Elizabeth during that photo, as they both distinctly remember Jim framing it up, and Annie being at his shoulder and watching it taken. But it does seem like a suitable answer for an otherwise bizarre event. Or it would, except for one strange thing. If Jim is to be believed, and his story never changed, he wasn't just contacted by newsreaders and skeptics and rocket technicians. After that photo was published, there was also at least one appearance by figures commonly known in paranormal circles as the Men in Black, which would, of course, suggest that there was more to his photo than a simple trick of the light. The Men in Black movie series made the concept popular with the public, but conspiracy theorists and ufologists have discussed the strange figures for decades. The general consensus is that these agents may appear after UFO sightings or alien encounters. As How Stuff Works explained, quote, "In popular culture, Men in Black are United States federal government agents who wear black suits and prevent UFO witnesses from sharing evidence related to their encounters. Men in Black don't necessarily wear dark suits and work for the government. The term Men in Black can refer to any mysterious figures who appear after UFO sightings. Some even claim that these agents have supernatural powers or are aliens themselves. The theories, they can get pretty twisty. Jim Templeton did not go nearly that far. He simply stated that not long after his photo was published internationally, strange men showed up at his workplace. According to the News and Star, the men had claimed to be from the government, but they refused to show Jim any identification. As Jim recalled to a publication called The People in 1997, quote, "They came in a black Jaguar and were dressed in black suits. I went with them to the Solway estuary. They asked me if this was the spot where I saw the spaceman, and I said, 'What spaceman? I didn't see anybody.' Then, the paper wrote, quote, "The shadowy figures suddenly turned on their heels and walked away, leaving Jim stranded 5 miles from home." And yes, he had to walk all the way back alone. Now, certainly, we asked ourselves, did Jim make up this visit? And we honestly have no idea. It does seem unlikely, though. It was reported on in local papers at the time, but in a different context. Jim seemed to think that, initially at least, he was being pranked. In a clipping that Dr. David Clark found, Jim is quoted as saying, "It all looks like a leg pull to me. I'm sure the men were not security agents, and I have no idea why they'd want to pass themselves off as such." Of course, he'd also never heard of Men in Black at that time. Why would he have? He was not a UFO aficionado, and it would be some years before he was introduced to the idea and would recognize its significance. Certainly, the two men could have been pulling Jim's leg, or they could have been up to something else entirely. Generally, though, people seem to accept that the event at least happened. Everyone who ever spoke to Jim seemed to find him honest, whether or not they believe the photo was real. It's more a matter of what actually happened that day out on Burra Marsh and what he captured with his camera that's remained up for debate. When Jim Templeton passed away in 2011, that answer had still not been decided, and it still has not to this day. Dr. David Clark suspects that the figure was indeed Jim's wife Annie. Others who have extensively studied the photo, they remain believers and argue that the figure simply cannot be explained away so easily. As the writer James Conrad, who we should tell you is very much down with the strange and unusual, told the News and Star, quote, "I am inclined to support the position that the photograph shows an unknown entity who was not visibly present to the photographer Jim Templeton and the other 3 members of his family. If it turns out there is nothing mysterious to the photograph, then so be it. But in the meantime, there are questions that still need answering before anyone can say the case is solved and closed." And as for us, well, we honestly aren't sure what to make of that photo. It does seem that it could easily be a trick of the light or exposure. That's what many photographers think. And maybe some strange men in strange suits and with an expensive car decided to play a trick on Jim for reasons that we simply can't explain. But then again, perhaps there was a thread there that we cannot untangle and explain away as neatly as all that. And those are the mysteries that we like best, the ones that you begin to unravel just to find another knot. It is the best kind of story, isn't it? We hope you'll join us next time for another real-life story from the fine print of America's local papers, from the lives of regular people, just like you and me, except for one strange thing. One Strange Thing is an independent podcast. To support the show and to hear more of the entirely true and enticingly peculiar, you now have 3 options to enjoy 2 extra bonus episodes a month. If you'd like to subscribe on Apple Premium, we have established a new feed, so be sure to look for that. You will need to resubscribe to get your premium episodes if you were previously subscribed. As a bonus, you will now get ad-free and early releases of our main feed episodes as well. It will live on the same channel as the premium subscription for our other podcast, The Fall Line. You'll have access to that content too. It's all there for $5 a month. If you subscribe to Patreon, nothing has changed. There you will find ad-free early releases of our regular episodes, 2 full-length bonus episodes, monthly giveaways, and blog posts, all for $5 a month. We hope you'll check out one of these options and support the show. There's a link in our show notes. And if you enjoy One Strange Thing, please take a moment to leave us a great rating or review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.